Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
We hope you enjoy listening to this podcast of St. Louis on the Air, brought to you by University College at Washington University, with undergraduate and graduate programs part-time, evening, and online. University College at Washington University, offering world-class education within reach.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. It wasn't the biggest story of the past few days, but it was one of the more unusual, and it gives home for the holidays brand new meaning. That was the theft of a tiny house parked in South St. Louis. The story has a happy ending after an anxious few days for the tiny house homeowner, Meghan Panu. Meghan joins us in studio to tell her story. Meghan.
Hi.
Welcome to our studio.
Thanks for having me.
It really does give home for the holidays a new meaning, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah.
Tell us how all this got started.
From the very beginning?
Yeah, not everybody's familiar with this.
Yeah,
story.
sure. I got into the idea of tiny houses after watching several documentaries on Netflix, and it really piqued my interest. So I was at Webster University and sort of figuring out what I wanted to do with my major. I started off as an English major, realized that wasn't a good fit for me, and I wanted to do something a little different. So I partnered with Webster and sort of designed my own major, and that was in environmental studies. So for me, it was sort of analyzing the environment from a more social perspective. And I went to my professors and I said, hey, I want to build a tiny house. This is what I want to do for my senior thesis. And from the very beginning, it was nothing but support. I think, at first they're like, okay, you're gonna build this tiny house in however many years, and that's gonna be your project. And from the get-go, I was convinced that this is what I was gonna do. So last January is when the actual building began. And I had been thinking about it for a year before that, and planning and buying the trailer and getting just sort of some of the logistics worked out.
Before you continue,
yeah,
how tiny is a tiny house? Give me some sense of how tiny it actually is.
It varies. It can be... Typically, it ranges from like 800 feet would be
Square
your
feet.
max.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So my tiny house is 8.5 by 20 feet. Mm-hmm. So that's going to give me roughly 160 square feet to live in, which is pretty big to me compared to what some other people are doing. But I think it's a good fit. Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay, let's go back to the point where you designed it, I assume, yourself?
Right.
And then started construction a few months back.
Yeah, so my friend Abby Dorning, actually, she's a sketch artist. So I sort of told her what I was envisioning. She drew it up for me. But then that sort of changed once I received the materials. So I didn't really have any of that planned out either. And so much of my focus was wanting to utilize secondhand materials.
Recycling stuff.
Right. So I purchased all used windows for $50 each. And they're scratched and they're imperfect, but they're perfect for me. And they were such a good fit. So I sort of designed the house according to the materials that I received. And I think, too, that's why this process has taken so long, because I've been sort of patiently waiting for when things, when people no longer want these things, give them to me,
You're not living in the house now?
Not yet.
Nope. That's down the road.
Right. So the exterior is completed. And for the next 2 months, I plan on finishing the interior, 2 months more or less. And then by the spring, I hope to be living in it.
Okay, so you were out and about, I guess, buying the material for the house, as I understand the story. What happened?
So the house was parked outside of Refab, and I'm good friends with the owner, Eric. So he agreed to let me park the house there. They would sort of keep an eye on it. I would buy material from them, but it was a way for me to also showcase the house and what I was doing. So I would have people message me just from seeing it parked on Gravois in Michigan and saying, hey, I like what you're doing. Tell me more a little bit about it. And so it was a good way for me to have this conversation with people. Unfortunately, on Saturday, I get a call from Eric, and I was on my way out the door to go to work, and he asked if I had moved the house overnight. And immediately, my heart just sinks, and it doesn't feel good, and there was a possibility that it could have been towed by the city, but without any sort of notice, and with it being on a Friday evening, early Saturday morning, I knew that, there was...
Somebody stole it.
Yeah, it was stolen. Yeah.
Make a long story short.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay, well, that was an awful feeling for you, of course, but it shouldn't be hard to find.
That was my thought process from the very beginning. Like, surely this thing is going to turn up within that day or the next day. Because it's small, but down a highway, it's 12 and a half feet tall, so it sticks out. Yeah.
It was on wheels. It was on a trailer of some sort.
Yep.
Is that going to be the permanent disposition of this property when you finally do find a place? Keep it on wheels?
Yeah, it's going to stay on wheels. But yeah, so it's permanently structured to the trailer.
And you're looking for a place to put it permanently when it's finished.
So I have a place actually in the works, and this week I was planning on moving it there. So it's going to be on a lot in the Benton Park West area. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the search for for this property. How did that go? How are you working with the police on this?
So I called and reported the house, and that was a little silly to be on the phone with the operator and saying, "Hi, my house is missing. It's on wheels." It's a little confusing, I think, and it was for them at first. But I felt like I had to take matters into my own hands, and social media was really my ally in all of this. And I'm fortunate that I had that page, from the very beginning of this project. So people were already in the loop of what was going on and how long I'd been building it. So it was really a cry for help that I used Facebook to see if anyone had seen anything and to get into contact with me.
Any responses from Facebook?
Hundreds.
People had actually seen it or just reacting to the story?
So reacting to the story, but then I received a handful of helpful tips of people who thought they'd seen it. But I was still weary of those things too, because tiny houses are more common now. It's possible that, it could have been another one going down the road.
Well, how did it finally turn up?
So I slept in on Wednesday, and that was the first time I had gotten some good sleep. And I had seen all these messages from Twitter and Facebook and Instagram that they had found the house in House Springs, Missouri. So a detective called me that morning. They had found the house. It was in a wooded area off of a main road. And so I guess someone called in and reported it to them, and then they took it to the tow yard.
No suspects yet?
Not yet. Yeah, so that's sort of the next step in all of this is finding out who did it and why they did it. And I think that's just what's weighing on my mind now is I don't know why they took it.
No, of course we won't know until we find out exactly who did it. But I think one suspicion might be if it was taken on a Friday night, that maybe some younger people out just having a little fun, maybe?
It could be anything. Yeah, it's hard to say why you would want to take it, too. And you look in the windows and you see that it's unfinished. It's a lot of work for somebody to take that on. So, for now, it's a mystery still.
But the police still actively looking for suspects,
yeah, and they're going to get in contact with me once they do have that figured out.
Do you have a reward out?
Not yet. Not yet. I'll have to wait and see what happens within, the next few days, next few weeks. It's a waiting game, but we'll have to see.
Well, tell us what this place is going to be like when you're finished. You have a little work to do on it
Yeah.
yet. Describe the interior and how functional it's going to be. I mean, you'll need toilet, you'll need
Yeah.
some place to cook, and you'll need, the things you normally have in a house.
So yeah, it's gonna be it's gonna have all these same amenities that you would find in your typical home. I have a compost toilet that I purchased, so that's gonna cut back on the water that I would be using. It's gonna have a shower, a lofted bed, a fireplace,
Oh,
and a living room, and then a full kitchen.
a wood-burning fireplace?
Yeah,
Really? Incredible. And all of this in, 160 square
right.
feet of
It's
living
cozy,
space?
Yeah. It's really cozy.
Yeah. This is really catching on. You mentioned that a moment ago. We've seen things on television that this really is a trend. I guess there is what's called a minimalist trend going on in the country today. Would you describe yourself as a minimalist?
I don't know if I would. I think it's a very trendy term right now. I think for me, it's just trying to be critical of the choices that I make as a consumer always, and thinking about, what is it that I need versus what I want. And those are sort of the questions that the tiny house has really forced me to think about. And I'm thinking about it all the time because my space is so limited. But I think, whether you have a tiny house or not, it's good practice to have less, and it's a privilege to have less sometimes. And I think about that all the time. That I sort of recognize, I recognize that, but it's just wanting to be better and wanting to leave a mark that is less destructive.
You grew up in Wildwood, you said off the air. What do you think when you drive through that neighborhoods out there and see some of these huge places that are in that neck of the woods?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting to grow up around all of that, but also to sort of recognize that I never want to be a part of that, and that's okay. We all have choices, and I think for me, it's just wanting less.
If you can get by with it, why not? I mean,
Right.
why not? Going back to where you ultimately hope to put the home, what do you do about water? I mean, you're talking about you have a lot in the Benton Park neighborhood. Where does the water come from? Where does the electricity come from?
So I know of one other tiny house in the city, and they've dug a line from someone's property, and they've taken the water from there and the electric. So there's different ways that you can do it. With my tiny house, I plan to have a hybrid, so it's going to have the capabilities to be on the grid and off the grid. So I'd like to have a 40-gallon water storage tank in my tiny house too. So, if that ever becomes a problem, I can sort of self-rely.
You're going to have to make an arrangement with neighbors to kind of borrow some of their electricity and water?
Yeah, that's another conversation too. Trying to talk to people about, being okay with that. And my goals with this project too is to say, look, we can all coexist together and we can all live a little differently, but no one way is the right way or the wrong way. But if we can all just sort of help one another with whatever our dreams are or however we want to live, with the environment in mind and being careful of the choices that we make. But yeah, those are going to be conversations that I'm going to have with my future neighbors.
Well, you got a lesson in coexistence and friendliness from the people who brought your home back to you. I mean, that was a pretty nice story.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I just, from the bottom of my heart, I just have a lot of gratitude, and that's something that I've felt from the very beginning, just to see people sort of connect and bond over this and to say, hey, we're here to help you, and this isn't okay, and let's pull together our resources to get this back. And I think what's been so special about the tiny house for me is that it feels bigger than me at this point. It's not just me and the tiny house. It's sort of this larger thing happening, and I'm seeing it, and it's really special.
Well, part of the special thing that happened was the fact that a towing company brought it back to you free of charge,
For
as
free.
I understand.
Yeah. Yeah, so that helped with the that was a chaotic day for me. And the last thing that I was thinking about was how I'm going to get this back. I mean, it was important, but I, just wanted to get out there. And the guys at Ives Towing looked at me and said, "Hey, happy Merry Christmas. It's coming home, and we'll bring it for free."
Good for them. Were you surprised at the publicity this got, because it went national?
Absolutely. Yeah, I had no idea what sort of effect this was going to have on so many people, and I think that's just so cool, and I don't regret posting on Facebook. I did what I had to do, and that felt like my best support there, and how I was going to get it back. So
One final question, and because I think it's interesting having talked to you off the air. What's next for you? What do you plan to do? It sounds like a very interesting project that you're involved in.
yeah, so once I complete the house, I want to really take time to just be in that space. I'm going to have a lot more free time, and my bills won't be as high. I don't have a mortgage. So that's going to give me more opportunity to sort of do the things that matter. I'd like to volunteer. I'd like to travel. And I think, too, this has sort of sparked a possible calling for me, too, to find the ways in which St. Louis can be better about its urban planning. And how can we design more efficient and intentional communities where we live? So I want to be a part of that, and I feel like I'm working alongside a group of people who have that same desire, and I'm excited to see where we go from here.
What group is this?
So I'm working with a group of people who contacted me because they saw the tiny house, and they're like, "Hey, we want to build shipping containers. We want to build these different styles of homes, and we want to be a part of a community that sort of looks after each other." And we're a group of multi-generational people. We come from many different backgrounds. And so on this lot where I intend to plan or park the house at, we're going to have shipping containers, hopefully, and just different styles. And then these smaller spaces will hopefully, give us opportunities to have more community shared experiences.
To be young again.
Right?
Meghan, thank you so much for being with us. Congratulations on getting your
Yeah.
tiny house back, and best of luck to you with your project. We need more forward-looking thinkers such as yourself.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Meghan Panu, for telling us about the comings and goings of her tiny house.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.